In late December 2011, I found myself in a shit position. I was on the Strip in Las Vegas, Nevada. I experienced the worst Christmas I had ever had, sitting in the corner of the famous sports book in the MGM Grand Casino. My brother had wired me about $30 on Christmas morning, and I had used the money to make a series of parlay bets on that day's Christmas Day action. I remember I was the first one in the casino that morning, bright and early. It was a cold morning, and I had to limp from the back seat of my car, parked across the street at the Flamingo, all the way to the MGM Grand Casino. This is because I had been crunched up in the back seat of my car for the previous 12 hours. I'm 6'3", so the only way I could fit in the back seat of a Mazda Protege was if I was curled up in a fetal position, and that's how I had been sitting for the previous 12 hours. Normally it wasn't for as long of a period of time, but on this previous night I had been avoiding all the chaotic Christmas Eve celebrations happening just over on the Four Corners area of the Strip. After the Western Union for my brother hit the prepaid debit card, I stood in front of a window teller at the MGM Sportsbook for like 10 minutes before someone finally came up and took my bets. Like I said, I made a series of parlay bets, but every parlay had one particular game in it. This was my solid pick, so I placed it in every bet I made that day. The one drawback was if I lost that first game, I would also lose every other bet that I made that day, but I figured there was no way I would lose that first game. It was the Celtics versus the Knicks in the Garden. I had the Celtics on the money line. I knew the entire roster of each team. They had played each other 6 months prior in a first-round playoff series, which I had watched closely, in which the Celtics had basically owned the Knicks. Never bet against the Knickerbockers on Christmas morning, because they came out swinging. I remember Tyson Chandler and Landry Fields had big games. I watched this first game enthusiastically, cheering along for the Celtics, which I normally never cheer for, on a tiny screen separate from the big screens in the corner of a sportsbook, away from everyone else, all by myself. There may have been other people watching, but I was sitting so close to the screen I couldn't see anyone else. There must have been behind me. However, I could feel their looks of disdain. They probably knew I was homeless. I'd been sleeping in my car for over a month. I had never felt worse than after I lost that first game. Even though it was pointless, fruitless, I watched the rest of that day, Christmas Day games, because I had nothing else to do, and it was Christmas Day. I spent the first 2 games moping around the MGA Grand. By the time the third game came out, I maneuvered to the lowly Tropicana Sportsbook, where I could much more easily steal food off the room service carts and clean up in their public restroom. This was also the moment I started picking up half-smoked cigarettes from the ashtrays outside of the Tropicana. It was something I had always ridiculed others for doing before, but now I had gotten so low, I figured, what's the use? I might contract hepatitis from the used cigarette, but at least it might give me a decent head rush. When you ain't got nothing on Christmas Day, at least you got cigarettes in the ashtray. This was a low point in my life, but I would get myself out of it by the next year. By New Year's Day, I would find myself in a totally new city and a totally new life. So go ahead and subscribe for the next part. My name is Gregory Brandt, and I hope you have a wonderful New Year's.